introduce them. A couple of updates. First of all, I was listening to the news this morning, and it's a year to the date when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. And it feels like a year in some ways, and feels like much more than a year in others. And on Friday, it'll be a year anniversary since we all last met face to face in a kind of normal way without masks and everything here at the school. So we hope you're all staying safe and well, and we're seeing increased access to vaccines now, and I'm sure you youngsters will be eligible soon enough, certainly by the time we come back in the fall. And things I think will be quite different by the fall. I'm not sure exactly what the school will look like, but we'll get more guidance from the university here in the weeks and months to come. Upcoming, a couple of things. March 18th, a week from today, Alex Anmayan is going to be speaking from Boston. He's the co-founder and principal of Anmayan Winton Architects. He was here many years ago as a lecturer, and was kind enough to give a tour of his office and present a lecture the spring before last when Gunderson and I took a studio up to Boston. So Alex and I went to school together, graduated together. He's a good friend. I was just talking to him the other day, and he's getting his COVID vaccine the morning of the 18th, so we hope he's in good shape by the afternoon. On April 1st, appropriately enough, a good friend of the school, Brian Cantley, will be here. Many of you know Brian from his previous lectures and his many appearances for thesis reviews. And he's based in LA, teaches at Cal State Fullerton, and he's a professor of design theory there. And finally, on April 22nd, Everald Colas, another good friend, the Store and Studio for Architecture. He's the founding partner. He's based in St. Pete and Miami, I think, but primarily St. Pete. And Everald has a very interesting professional background, having worked for Big and other New York firms before relocating here to the greater Tampa Bay area. So that will round out our lecture series for the spring. We also have thesis reviews coming up on the 7th, 8th, and 9th, I think, of April. If those days are wrong, thesis students don't panic. It's whatever you've been told. But I think it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And those will run, we think, from like 10 to 3 or something like that every day. And we really encourage you to take part in them as spectators. We've had really big turnout in the recent past. And I think it's just a lot of fun. The students are working hard. They've done a great job working online with their thesis committees. And we have some great projects upcoming, as always. But we have some great projects coming up this year. And we really look forward to that. And we'll have an interesting set of guests sitting in as critics as well. And then we have the awards ceremony on March 31st, I think. That'll be live and in living color here on Teams. You've probably seen an advert for that on the listserv, and we'll continue to inundate you with invites and information so you don't have a boring moment here at school. So let's get going. Jerel McCants and Carlos Molnar overlapped as graduate students at the School of Architecture and Community Design. I suppose they'll talk a little bit about that. And I asked them to come because they're grads, which is important. They're grads of our program, and they're well into their careers now. They're not old men by any means, but even though they might feel it every now and again, yeah. But they're well established as practitioners, and they're good friends, and their firms have kind of collaborated frequently, shared office space, jumped on projects to help one another out, and they have this really beautiful working relationship over the years that was in some ways founded by how they met, and they'll talk a little bit about that. I've known both of them for a while. Carlos has taught at the school for a long time. Jerel and Carlos both are active as critics in thesis reviews and regular studio reviews and things like that. And we really value their participation with the program, not only because they're local practitioners, but very importantly, they're alumni. Carlos is the managing principal of Soul Design Studio, located in Ybor. And Jerel runs Jerel McCants Architecture, also in the Ybor area. So let me hand it over to you guys and let you take it away. Thanks very much for being here. And I'll hand it over to you now. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Good afternoon.
All right, I'm Jerel.
And I'm Carlos.
And today we're going to talk to you about collaboration.
Each of our practices were set on our respected paths
based on our abilities to collaborate on projects with other firms
and compete in an evolutionary market of changing conditions
and endure with the pitfalls most firms cannot survive.
Don't worry, by the way, we won't be doing this all day. One added thing, I see Steve's on here. Bob and Steve have promised to give extra credit to anyone that unmutes and laughs at any of our bad jokes.
Yeah.
So we'll be keeping a running tab on that, okay?
So
thanks, guys.
You can see the presentation, right? Everybody can see the presentation?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we can see it.
Let's go.
All right.
So why architecture? Okay, so for me, architecture was something I was always interested in from my early start. As soon as I hit the planet, I was off and running. I was obsessed with form making, and I loved creative arts. I would draw for hours until I was physically tired, you know, and then of course I had a high aptitude for math and sciences.
For me, it was a little bit different. I saw architecture as this beautiful collaboration between art and science. I also love to play with Legos. I rarely ever made things from the box of what the instructions told me to do. I actually enjoyed more taking them apart and building like I want to. And I love puzzles. I love the idea of problem solving. So as Bob touched on a little bit, Jerel and I did meet at USF. Way back in the 80s, USF would put together a person from each class, as in first year, second year, third year. Jerel's already laughing because I was one of the senior members. I was kind of beginning to work towards my thesis, and he was coming as a freshman, and I still like to call him my Padawan, right, for those of you Star Wars, and he hates that, but I actually still love to do that. But we met in this charrette. It was a charrette for a project on USF campus, and we had some other team members, and we were putting together a section. We tried to remember who those team members were, and we couldn't remember. Interesting part is we came in second. We're pretty sure it was the other people who we couldn't remember it's fault that we didn't actually win the charrette. So, but that's actually an interesting point because a lot of you are in the middle of your charrette. In the studio. You're getting used to the environment. You're developing some good, some bad relationships with classmates, but those are actually really important for your future, as much as it sounds weird to say. We're both sitting here as examples of that. Each of you, once you graduate, you're going to go off to different firms. You know, you're going to go through different experiences. You're going to try, some of you try small firms, some of you try medium-sized firms, some of you try large firms. You're each going to get a different working environment, and it's actually a good thing when you do get together, you still keep in touch. You're going to start to share those experiences with each other. You know, if someone's working in a small firm and say, well, I'm doing this, you know, I'm doing this kind of project. At the big firms, it's a really good way to begin to determine what kind of firm fits your personality, fits your passion for architecture. You know, those first few years really are a learning experience for you. And if you continue to stay in the same area, each of you begins to work your way up at, you know, higher and higher positions within the same firms. And at one day it does become a really powerful networking tool. So we did that. We kept in touch. We started working. We each kind of went to different firms. We each started to work our way up to young architects, designers, and all of a sudden 2010 comes around and the market just crashed. Firms laid off somewhere between 50 to 80% of their staff. I can still remember one day I got a call from, I think, 5 different people that said, holy cow, I just lost my job. What the heck am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do. So this image here, I always use it as a metaphor. It's like you had all these big blocks of ice and the economy was this massive sledgehammer, and as a metaphor, it just smashed it. And as you can see from the pictures, all these little shards went off. Well, each of those shards is like is a design professional, an architect. And all they know what to do to make a living, to pay their bills, is to do architecture. So now you've got this economy that's depressed. You've got bigger firms that are still there, but they're a fraction of the size. You've got all these other architects wandering around trying to figure out how to start a firm. So what we're going to tell you is that that's not always the best way. Now, that was a necessity at the time, but not the best way. The best way to do it, really, in our opinion, is kind of work your way through the different levels of a firm. You start as a team member. You're coming in, you're learning about what is architecture, professionally speaking. You're learning how to put CDs together. You're learning about projects. You start learning about consultants and how to manage consultants. You move up a level up to a couple of years, and now you're a team leader. Now you're maybe leading a team of 1 or 2 people, and the project's yours, and maybe you're working underneath a project architect. You start learning the bigger issues of maybe consultant coordination, and start to learn about timeline budgets. You work up again, and now you've passed your test. You're a project architect. You're licensed. Welcome to liability, right? We're sorry. But now you've got a different role. You're starting to manage a budget. You're starting to look at contracts. You're starting to figure out how the business side works. You go up again, you're project manager. Now maybe you're managing multiple architects on larger projects, with the last phase really being a vested partner or a principal. Now, each of these stages that you go through in your career, and that could be 20 years right there that I just laid out. Each of those stages teaches you something else about what it is to start a practice, okay? How to do the work, how to kind of start to do things, and to the ultimate point of where you are the main client coordination, the client liaison, and you're working at getting work. So now, in this metaphor, you've got all these little shards of ice that are everywhere, and all these little things people are starting to think about, how do I start a firm? What do I do? How do I get a job? Jerel's going to talk a little bit about starting a practice and the challenges, but imagine that the environment is warming up. All these little shards of ice are starting to come together and start to create a practice. So, Jerel, why don't you tell us about starting a practice?
All right. So as Carlos said, of course, this was during the time of that Great Recession. Me and other colleagues, that's the image of myself and 2 other colleagues, and we all started USF program together way back in early 2000, right? And so we had made it to that level of project architect / project manager. So we were managing our individual projects for firms. And as the downsize kept occurring, my other 2 colleagues, they were let go, and that firm actually closed, but it was back downsized from a 30-person firm to like a 6-person firm within a matter of months. So it was a free fall, right, at that time. So it was only a matter of time before the same thing happened to me, and I was at a small boutique firm. And of course, that happened a couple of months later, and so we decided to just roll right into our own practice. Well, at the time, we were doing projects for contractors that couldn't afford the design services of the firms that we were working for. So while we had full-time jobs, we were working for those contractors and doing small additions and residential projects mainly that larger firms wouldn't be interested at the time because they wouldn't make a fee on it, a good profit on it. So that did help us create a network while we were still employed. So after we were all downsized and decided to venture out on our own as this collective, which was called Observe Group. It was a heavily design-oriented firm, and we really focused on entering competitions as much as we could, and then at that time, paying the bills, which was more of a necessity. So we had to make that a full-time job. It was not about the Benjamins, it was not about making more money. It was about survival at that time and how much you cared about the profession. So there was no other options for me, because I felt like I said, I was put on this earth to do design, and that's it. There's no other option for me. So you have to make it work. So that's what we did within this group that we created. And I know Carlos had a similar situation. Not quite.
Yeah, my situation was similar, but potentially not quite as smart as yours. I actually quit a paying job. That being said, my wife almost did end my own professional career pretty early, but after we discussed it, and those of you, by the way, know my wife, know what I mean, she was actually very supportive and helped keep the firm alive. So I'm very thankful.
Right. Yeah. Definitely not the best decision, especially if you're married. But,
Yeah.
unfortunately, you had a strong network, which was important in that downturn period. Uh, so once you start a practice, you always want to establish your identity, right? So in order to, you're going to start out small, so you have to have that brand out there. And I chose this slide because it kind of just popped out where Jason Bourne, who are you going to be in this profession? Like he didn't know who he was till like the third movie, right? He was going around killing people, and then he's like, okay, oh yeah, this is what I was meant to be, right? So you really got to know what from the start what you're going to do within the profession of architecture, right? So what's going to be your contribution? Based on my experience, I worked I worked in different cities and different states before I came back to Florida to form an observe group. But my experience was in educational and municipal work. And so I got really good at understanding how those projects work. So that was going to be my specialization. And as you developed and as we developed that observe group, we noticed that, we all had, even though we had the same education, we had different specializations. And that foundation was starting to show itself where I was pursuing certain projects and they were pursuing other projects, and we were going in different directions. So we needed to figure out what we were going to be as a group. And that was one of our failures from just jumping into it, because it was fun when we were working for full-time firms and doing competitions. And we had some awards that were done on a national level of conceptual projects. They weren't built, but they were just nice accolades, right? So it's like once you begin to form a foundation that's going to pay your bills and establish an identity in the neighborhood, in a community, you have to have that foundation. So that was our failure of not really focusing on those key brand items, specialization. And then there was 3 principles, so we were very top heavy, right? So it was an inverted pyramid, so it was very unstable. It was a lot of us and no staff, because we couldn't afford it. So that was another issue where we were trying to figure out, okay, what's our strategic plan? How are we going to outreach to certain clients? And from there, we just kept going in different directions, and it eventually led to we had to dissolve the company, and it almost dissolved our friendship as well. So fortunately, we had a strong enough bond and respect for each other that stayed intact. But that happens when you're kind of jump out there. You can lose friendships and even family members, right? People get divorced and everything over this. So it's a very serious undertaking. And I started my practice in 01, and moved from there and focused mainly on educational and that municipal civic work, and as well as doing some residential.
So I had a similar story. I had been working throughout the Tampa Bay area and a little bit of Sarasota, and I worked at different firms. I had been lucky enough to kind of work my way up and go from project team member to project manager to where I was a principal at a firm. And as I said, in March of 2010, got with my wife and made a decision to start Soul Design. I was a one-man shop. I worked out of my studio apartment in the back of my bungalow in Seminole Heights, and started working. Had some contacts, had some projects from previous firms that I asked if they wanted to come with me or they could stay at the firm, and they chose to come with me, and that kind of began the practice. Interesting part of this is when I started it, as Jerel said, that he had a relationship with 2 other friends of ours that were in his class and I had kind of worked with as well, Mike and Gino. And we had been collaborating for a long time just on casual work, and they actually became part of Soul Design. So we really can say it kind of stayed in the family, that while, Observe changed and JMA changed, Soul changed as well and merged with 2 members of Observe, which again, I think only in the future or kind of the past, kind of strengthened the relationship as well. As Jerel said, each of us had different kind of experiences and professional specialities. Mine was always very much in hospitality. I had just come off doing a very large hotel in Puerto Rico, managing as well as multiple restaurants and bars. And That's a very interesting market that once you kind of start diving into the restaurant and the bars, that the community is very tight and it can kind of lead you on a path. And then we ended up doing a lot of office projects as well. We started taking on, when Mike and Gino joined, they had an office project that I had also done some offices, and we kind of collaborated on those. But we really took that advantage, like Jerel said, each of us were kind of working towards different strengths.
Right, right. And so still on that item of that topic of starting to practice, like you have to have your goals, right? What are going to be, how are you going to establish the direction of your firm? And, clients just aren't going to come to you. You have to find a way to let people know what you can do, right? Because you have to have that differentiator, like what's going to be different about your firm than other firms. How are you going to be able to sell this to people that don't know anything about you? It's always that when you're in school, you of course you're following these famous architects, and you realize when you're out and practicing, it's not about you, right? It's not about your own beliefs or your own philosophy on architecture. It's about the people are going to hire you based on what you can do or what right? And it's not really about they're going to come to you to design some awesome structure. That's going to be totally your own thoughts and meditation on architecture, and that just rarely happens, right? So you have to earn the client's trust, and provide and try to prove your ability to perform, based on your past experiences working on whatever building type that you gain knowledge base from. So once you do that, you establish a good team. You want to be able to show that you got capacity. You want to have a diverse range of experience, to meet that kind of project type.
And to Gerald's point, when you're these small firms, one of the biggest client fears is, well, what's going to happen to my project? What's going to happen to my project if you get hit by a bus?
Yeah, it's not going to happen to me. I'm way too quick for that, right? That's the laugh box. But anyway, the whole thing is that you want to create that trust with that client, right? So you want to be able to put your client's fears at ease and understand that, once you increase your firm's experience and presence in the community, they're going to have more comfort in going to you to provide whatever project that they need to have done. And just like some of the keys to a successful firm, by way of Philip Johnson, is get the job, right? Get the job. And yep, you got it, right? Get the job, right? So that's what the main thing about keeping that practice going.
At one point here, you'll notice that the bus hitting the young architect there, starting his own practice, is a registered architect. Now, we didn't Photoshop that. That was just a happy occurrence. Yeah. Gerald found that image.
Is some other victim.
Some other firm just took out that architect.
Right. Big firm took out the small guy.
Exactly. So I guess you're asking the question, so how do you begin to make the client feel more at ease, right? Well, collaboration. So what you're looking at is kind of the logo that we had come up with the concept that we'll talk about here shortly about collaboration. All right, so the biggest challenge, go to the next slide, Joe.
Okay, all right.
There we go. All right, what is collaboration? By the way, just for you, if you're wondering why we're using a lot of movie pictures, we had always been that kind of studio environment where throughout the day, and we still do today, we are constantly playing movies. We're big movie buffs. So it's a good metaphor for us to use for everything. So collaboration, it's a group of people with different ideas and beliefs coming together to accomplish a common goal, just like Reservoir Dogs here. And hopefully you don't kill each other. That's what your hope is, right? So we started this concept that we came up with called Sync Collaborative. This was right after we all started kind of creating our firms and trying to figure out how to do things. And it started really simple, actually. We were at a coffee shop, and again, that's your first office, right? You're at Starbucks. We used to actually go to Bunker, like right over there in Ybor City, and we just talk with each other, like kind of use each other as sounding boards. And we're sitting there talking, and we're like, man, each of us are paying for the same thing. You're like, Gerald, you got a printer. You got a printer. We're all like paying. We have 5 printers amongst us here with 5, we're each paying the internet service 5 times, and we're doing all these things, and there's so much duplication when we're starting to talk about this collaboration. And then we started talking about, like, man, I really could use some help on this. Is there any way you could jump on and help me with it? So it started with this loose conversation in a coffee shop. And it ended up coming out to the fact that we really could find a way to kind of share 3 things: resources and staff, right? Our experience and advice to each other on problems within the profession. And thirdly, being the infrastructure, right? The things you need to do your work. So in 2012, 4 firms came together, and we started the logo that you see there, Sync Collaborative. It really became a small firm incubator. Thank you, Joe. It became a small firm incubator because, as it started with just 4 of us, actually different people, single man, woman shops would come through, and we'd let them use our conference room. We'd let them, come in and work with us, or we'd assist them on a project. And at one point, there was multiple firms or people just kind of coming through Sync Collaborative. The thing we learned were 3 principles of Sync. And it's the 3 principles, I think, that got us through the hardships of collaboration. As you guys know, I may have taught some of you, I've taught the materials and methods class in the cantilever, and I know there were many arguments that came out of group dynamic projects. I can pretty much assure that 1 to 3 teams every year would have an issue. We knew that going in. So we said, all right, the 3 things we need to handle to be successful. 1, recognition and ego, okay? If I ask Jerel to join me on a project and to assist me and collaborate with me on a project, he has to be able to say he worked on it. It can't be, it's my project, it's my client. No. If he touched it and he helped with it and we collaborated together, he is part of the project, and it goes on his portfolio just like it does mine. And we put it in writing. It was a collaborative project by Sync Collaborative. So that was one thing. You have to get past the ego and give proper recognition when you touched it.
Right. Leave your ego at the door, right? And so even on the title sheets, right, we have both firm names on there, to show that the client that there was multiple involvement.
Yep. And there was always a prime. There was always a prime, and then there was a collaboration team. So we handled the logistics of it. Number 2, client list. Those of older people there, remember there used to be these little black books, and you keep all your passwords, your phone numbers, information. That is the beating heart of any firm. You putting together your client list and creating these contacts, creating a network. That is the soul, the heart of the firm. And the biggest challenge when you're bringing on another firm is, they may, my client might like them better than me. There was a rule. If I'm lead, and just example, or Jerel's lead, and he brings me on to his project, that is his client. We, as a firm, cannot go after that client or do any work with that client unless he says, no, I'm too busy, I can't do it, or no, thank you, I don't want to do that project. That is his client, period. There was no discussions about it.
Right. No stealing other people's cheese, right? For all you salespeople out there, yes.
That's right. Third one, and probably some of the more challenging, was money. We always agreed when we did a collaborative project, before the project, almost as the proposal was being done, and we knew it was going to be a collaborative project, we sat down, we looked at the budget, and we assigned tasks, hours, and cost. So we'd agreed to kind of work with each other. We created kind of a similar, I would charge Jerel this much per hour to help him on a project. Jerel would charge me the same cost. So the numbers were always out there. They were open, but they were agreed to, and most critical, in writing before a project ever started.
Right. And that's when it's truly about the Benjamins, right?
Getting it settled, right. So then one day, we're starting this. We're actually still working out of my mother-in-law's suite in the back. We're doing some work. Jerel and I were walking. We had a meeting in Ybor or something, and we were walking past an office, this one that you see right here. And I happened to see the landlord. I'd actually leased that office about 6-7 years ago from a previous firm when I opened up a local office. And some landlord, we kind of caught up, and he said, hey, and he was literally like hanging up a sign that says for lease. And I said, is that space for lease? He goes, yeah, they just moved down. I'm about to advertise. I said, don't put the sign up. I said, give me a day. I called all the guys and girls from SICK. I said, hey, get down here. We need to look at this space. This would be perfect for our first office. Any of you that ever bought your first home or really signed your first lease, that is a scary, scary day. You know, at this point, we were just working on projects to make an income to pay for our families, right? The minute we started to sign a lease, there was some other dollars allocated for something else. That was a major milestone in sync. We took that jump. We talked about it as a team, and I'll say some people didn't want to get in, some people did, and that was fine. But there was a big enough group of us where we split the cost of our first office. That was a big deal, and to be honest with you, that was a major milestone into landing new and bigger clients. We weren't meeting in Starbucks anymore. We weren't in my garage or Jerel's living room. Okay, we had a physical office. Just telling your client, I'd like to, please come by. We can sit down in our conference room and meet. That conference room is gold towards establishing a sense to the client that you have a presence, they can find you, you're a real firm. And even though it doesn't change your work product, it does let you begin to compete against some of these bigger firms. The next step is trying to differentiate yourself. As we were young, we did have to go after lower, we had to provide lower fees. We needed the work to put on our own portfolio that shows we could do it. We had to change the game. We had to create a different brand of service where, we would promise them, you're talking to the principal, I will be there for your every phone call. I will accept your phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning. I will be on your site at 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure the pour is right. You really had to prove yourself by overperforming. You had to be nimble. You had to move quickly. And to say it created long days and even longer nights is an understatement. So, yeah. Jerel, why don't you talk about how we basically survived through this?
Right. So that's the whole fear, right? Is to get out, right? So, of course, we had a different situation with, having to have a necessity to start our practice to stay relevant, to stay in the profession. And but it's still that fear, right? It's that fear of getting out there and free falling, like you're taking a dive off a cliff and you don't know, how you have no safety net, right? So it's like you gotta make it work, right? You gotta learn how to fly on the spot. So, when you're out there trying to survive during this kind of economy, and even, if the economy is stable, you still have that fear of like not having that paycheck every 2 weeks, right? So you have to get over that. And the only way to do it is really to take that leap of faith, right? Into your self and your abilities, and knowing you got the right foundation that you can, hopefully fly, right? So and of course it goes back to like why people are going to come to you, right? So they're going to come to you based on what you can do, what like I said before. So it's like you got to earn that client's trust. You got to, have the years of networking and create opportunities within that networking that can lead to future projects down the road. And it may not pay off dollar-wise, but it still helps you, people, you have, they'll be thinking about you, if you read them at the right time. Oh, what about this other guy out down here? He might be something reasonable. I met him a while back, and let's give him a try. So that does happen sometimes, right? So you have to get your name out there, and then you have to kind of still, even if you have that door that cracked, and when you had the opportunity to go after a client, and another person gives you a good referral for you, it gets your foot in the door. But then you still got to compete with other firms to get that job, right? So it only cracks that door open, but you still got to get in there and perform and show that you can have the ability and the competency and the capacity to do it, and to do it very well, right? So that then leads to growth, right? You got to understand what your growth is going to be. My growth when I started my practice was, working for nonprofits and for churches and that needed, minor stuff done, and it didn't really involve, some of them didn't need permits. It was very just, be done in a couple of weeks, but contractors still need plans to work from. So you were fitting a need at that time. It could be different for, different people. So it's like, you got to find what that non-traditional client is to build that client base, to get those referrals, right? To keep growing. And then when you're a small firm, you've got to look at yourself objectively. One of the good things about Sync, of course, we're in a big space, and it's all about perception too. So when a client walks in, even though it's 3-4 firms in there, it look like one firm, right? A bunch of people working on the computer, and we had a big conference room, so it played up our level of experience and capacity, right? That we had a large group. It just wasn't me that was kind of grooming and courting clients, right? So you have to have that ability and then adapt to survive. So even when we were talking amongst ourselves, we'd always give each other critiques and criticism about our work, about bouncing ideas that could be contract related, that could be industry related, because everybody has different viewpoints and experiences from different projects, different clients, dealing with different personalities. How do you handle this person that thinks this way? So that was very important sounding board, right? To go back and forth with Carlos and some other guys in the office and say, hey, I got a difficult person. Like, how do I go about this without, having it go, sideways or something? So, we had that ability to critique each other. And sometimes it wasn't good and it wasn't nice, but like I'm saying, you got to check the ego, right? You got to keep moving forward and look at it constructive criticism, because you get that in school, right? We get critiqued in school and we get our models torn apart and drawings we spent hours on, whatever, back in the day, and professors mark them up. It's like, man, how long you spent on that drawing. But that happens in the real world. And you need to develop that thick skin. So when we're out and we're battling each other and we're going at it, it's like, but it helps conflict resolution, right? It helps you develop and get stronger, right? So even when you're not doing well, I mean, all that stuff plays a role. And so, as a small firm, there are going to be trials and tribulations, right? Of a one-man shop. You're going to be doing it all, right? You got to get to work, right? You got to do the work, and you got to work on the business of the business. And a lot of times, running a business is a full-time business in itself, right? And the cause, right, you can agree with it. It's when you're out there, you have to segment your day, because we don't have 9 to 5 hours. That stopped as soon as you got out and took that leap, right? You work all day long. You get up in the morning, you have meetings with clients. You're trying to get new clients and groom them while you're meeting with existing clients. Then you're working on the business of the business, like drawing and drafting and creating the documents. And then at nighttime, after hours, you're working on the business of the business, doing invoicing and bookkeeping and making sure you're getting the bills paid. And then you gotta chase down clients that right, don't want to pay on time, and you got to make your mortgage payment, and like all that stuff can be stressful, and you got to do all that at the same time and still put a smile on your face the next morning.
I don't know if you noticed this, guys, but there's no fourth bullet in there for sleep, right? Right. That's an actual completely factual statement. Is that just like Jerel said, your day is taking so much about it. You're just trying to get through the day. We realized early this was not a sustainable path for us. This lack of sleep, when you have a family, seeing your kids, at some point you have to begin to allocate different parts of that list Jerel had up there to different people. You've got to say, okay, let me go meet today with the clients, and then you could keep drawing because we have a deadline tomorrow. If not, I'm drawing from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. and then presenting the drawing. So you have to start to allocate. We're going to kind of go over, so that kind of sets up how Sync Collaborative started, but we're going to kind of start to go through some projects. We're going to start with some projects that we did together, Jerel and I did together, as well as some other firms that we're going to talk about. One of the most important that Jerel's going to start to talk about is Hillsborough County Schools. I want to just say one thing. With Jerel's really well-established civic and school experience, the Hillsborough County Public Schools had a minority program, and it reinforced them wanting to give opportunities to small minority businesses, of which we are both city, state, county registered minority businesses. And they gave us an opportunity on some of these schools that, again, they were the smaller size schools, but they gave us an opportunity to prove that we could do the work. And I think for both of us, you're going to start to see as we start to go through this project, that was a huge milestone in each of our careers, and it began to show that we could do the bigger projects. We could do the civic and the commercial project. So
exactly. And so moving forward, we're going to, of course, Carlos mentioned Hillsborough County Public Schools. Like, this is one of the initial projects.
It's the first. Yeah, it's a first.
Yeah. Well, we have Pearson and Monroe, but still the same time. And then, but they liked us so much, right? They gave us multiple projects within the same year, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
So it was really cool. Like they really gave us the opportunity to perform based on prior experience with other firms, right? So this was it was very essential to keep operation of our firms, right, at that time. And Mintz Elementary was a school that was initially just a painting job. So they're gonna start you out with something easy. Oh, okay, they can paint, go and recoat a building, give it a fresh makeover. There's very minimal risk in that. They can't mess that up, right?
Yeah,
So
that was pretty much
on
it.
their side. Well, we're thinking, hey, that's a great opportunity, and it's the largest check that I've seen to date, right? That we saw to date.
Yeah, that was a big check.
Right.
I think we still have a copy of that check, so I think we still kept a copy of that check
on the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it was just a exterior coating project, and we went out there and saw that there were other issues going on, and there was some items that we saw that would probably be a hazard, especially from the kids that were working there. This is elementary school, and they had staff walking around, and it was a large open campus with multiple levels, and there was stucco that was cracking and peeling away from the exterior wall. It was delaminated from the surface, and it just was a bad stucco job, and that could easily have fallen off, and the wrong person at the wrong time could get hit and injured from that. So we had alerted the school board to that, and they went out and we all investigated. And they added that scope to the project where we had stucco remediation. Then we kept observing, hey, there's some other issue going on where, hey, there's like dissimilar metals. There's aluminum canopies on these steel structures, and they're corroding significantly. And then that became another item that they wanted to remedy, so they added that to the scope. So exterior coating turned out to be a three-phase project. And even though the time didn't reduce any at all, same time frame.
And barely fee, by the way, right? Barely the fee too.
Right. Yeah, the fee didn't vary, but we performed, we did it, we got the job done. The contractor was good to work with. We were able to get it done in the same amount of time as the painting project during the summer. And most of the projects were renovated when school was out for summer on an abbreviated schedule. And that made us look good to them, and of course made them look good because we were able to procure all the services and look out for their best interests.
An interesting thing about that, I think at the time, that was a really stressful project for us. And just like Jerel said, it kept kind of snowballing, but I think it showed the school board that we were treating this really like this was the holy grail for us. Right. I think we were just constantly working on this. We wanted to do it so well that they saw these different things, and we got really good grades for that. They grade you after each project.
Right.
We came out with really positive grades, and just like Jerel said, to the point where we're even getting more projects that same year because they saw the intensity that we were going after that project. So,
exactly.
So just as Jerel says, going to the next slide here, as Jerel was kind of leading the Sync collaborative team, let's call it like school board work and civic work, right? Jerel was kind of because of his experience in that genre of work. I was kind of doing the same. I was looking for hospitality, restaurants, beer. So early in the process, we got an opportunity to work on 8-1 Bay Brewing. What kind of people right out of school or don't love to work on a brewery because you have to go there and test the product and make sure it tastes good, that the space is appropriate, right? But this was a fun project for us. It was a very technical project, but it was a fun project because we were able to be creative also. We were able to make some fun things. We got some budget, right? We got some budget to do some murals and some kind of play with lights and things like that. So it was kind of our first opportunity with Sync Collaborative to really flex our muscles. So we had let's call it the highly technical school board side, which was really rigorous and you had to have your paperwork down. And then we had the other side of it, which was the creative, just the fun, creating fun spaces. So
right. And the owners were kind of young guys too. They relocated, and they were venturing. So it was a good collaboration.
We had similar aspects with them.
We were both fresh faces on the scene, right? So it was a great collaboration. Another project was Molnar Pestle, right? And that project was in Seminole Heights, and that was right, Carlos. You were the architect of record, and I was the project manager for that project. We
actually worked with Envision Architecture or Vision Advisor, another local small, just starting their firm that was beginning an owner's rep in the area as well.
Mhm.
So it was just another way to kind of bring some more people kind of into it. We worked together with that owner's rep as well.
Right, right. Yeah, go ahead and call.
So, so this was a little restaurant. You guys have maybe seen this change name. It was actually more rigorous than it seems. That Seminole Heights has a very rigid guidelines, actually. That you had to do certain things, you had to do in certain ways. There's requirements for glazing requirements, right? Fenestration requirements we had to meet with the city multiple times to get the zoning down and the uses and such. So it actually ended up being a rather challenging project. But you have another image, I think, of the. Do you have an image of the inside?
Yeah, interior. Yeah.
We actually, this was another one we started to play with, a very steampunky, fun aspect. They had all kinds of creative beers.
Mhm.
We had a really tight budget for this. They said, this is a metal building and
Right.
it looks like this and it has a sloped roof, and make it look really different and cool. And by the way, you have, a ton of budget. You have a little bit of budget, of which I think we spent mostly on furniture and inside cool things. So, and we still had to meet with the guidelines. So again, each step you kind of see you're being tested just a little bit more, each project seems to get just a little harder and harder as you go.
Right, right. So, and they even had that brass tap system from Italy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nothing lined up. Yeah. That was a challenging one to get in there. We had the specs on this and we didn't even know what we were getting to. So, yeah.
Right. So I guess we can, from there, right, we established the sync, got us up and off to the races, right? So then we started getting projects on our own that were, we ran independently, while still being associated with sync. And we started getting bigger clients to do our own projects under our own name. And, one of the projects I had that was, again, based on the school experience and with a new client from our firm was Tampa Housing Authority. And they tasked me to build a Head Start program. So of course they wanted to merge the Head Start program through Hillsborough County Public Schools, and it was on Tampa Housing Authority site, the Encore site, which was used to be a blighted area, like a project where it's very dilapidated, and the city went through and revamped that whole area. And it was somewhat historic because it had the stops way back in the Chitlin circuit, where performers back during the days of segregation would come down and go through those areas and perform. So it had a musical theme to it. So a lot of people, famous people like Ray Charles and Ella Fitzgerald stayed in this area. So the city and Tampa Housing Authority went and remodeled that whole area. And then they wanted to do a child care component to one of their mid-rises. So this was a design I did for a 2,500 square foot daycare facility. Everything in it I wanted to be very colorful and bright and have a musical theme to it. So all the undulations from the floor to the walls to the ceiling was based on musical components. Even some of the painting and everything had a rhythm to it to kind of tie into that whole musical element of that area, which was the Encore site.
So, as Jerel said, that a lot of these sync projects led to each of our firms becoming stronger within themselves. And we started to create a database of work. So next slide. One of the next big projects that we went after was actually Sun City Center. We were recommended because of collaboration with another GC, and our name got thrown in the hat to master plan Sun City Center. And obviously we just come from USF like, hey, community design, this is wonderful. We'd like to throw a name in the hat. It started out with about 12 different firms, and then they narrowed it to 6. From 6, we had to submit your qualifications, and they brought it down to 3. Then they interviewed 3. We made it through each level, and we actually won the job. One of the big things we were told later, that when they looked at our portfolio, they saw the amount of schools that we had done. They felt comfortable feeling like, well, if Hillsborough County Public Schools vetted them, they must be okay. We had the insurances down. We understood the paperwork of how to work with these institutions. So we master planned Sun City and that was back in 2013, 14. We master planned the next 20 years, and we are currently working on another project. This is one example of one of the office buildings. We are currently working on I think it's phase 5 right now. We're doing a 20,000 square foot multi-purpose building that we're submitting for permitting now. again, with some of the same collaborative people we've worked with before. Here's a picture of one of the interior elements of these spaces. And one of the great things about this project is we were able to talk Sun City into using sustainable products. Again, this is a retirement community that they're not necessarily looking at using the building, for the next 50 years, but they were conscious enough that we talked them through it. So all these buildings use a foam insulated module in ICF, and we used high insulation, we used high SEER ratings. We were actually a lot of LED lights way back when. And having now gone back, and you can tell by phase 5, they think these buildings are essentially, you close the door on a Friday with the air conditioning, you come in Monday, it's the same temperature. It's like you're living inside of a cooler, or a Yeti. And they've performed excellently over that time. So again, we wouldn't have gotten that project without our sync collaboration experience.
And this was a project that we recently completed last year. It was the middle school, Memorial Middle School, which is the feeder into the Hillsborough High School. They're both located in Seminole Heights, and both were built in the early 1920s. This building here, it has a series of about 9 buildings on campus, and it was originally built in like 1924. Had additions over the years, and of course, with a building that old, they had to integrate AC around the 50s, and everything was just a mess on the inside. And so this project was just to kind of revamp and upgrade this building to accompany the restoration that another architect, Igbo architecture firm, did with Hillsborough High School a few years ago. So this project, we had to go in and upgrade the entire mechanical, electrical, plumbing system. We had to coat the exterior brick from leaking because the grout was all decaying. So we had to put a waterproof surface on it. We had to change out the windows and do a lot of exterior finish upgrades. And then this middle school was only one of the few middle schools that had an auditorium. We had to update and refresh the auditorium, new sound system, new lighting, everything in it, hallways, corridors. It was a major project for us, and we completed that with a reputable contractor. And this project lasted about a year. Like, these projects last about a year long when it has that amount of programming that was required to have it completed. And it's it's just beautiful now. So.
Thank you. We'll speed up through a couple of these final projects. We want to leave some time for questions. So with a developer that we had, we did a hotel for, we were able to talk them into buying a building. And this is actually the office that I'm in right now. Jerel had been in for a long time, till only a few weeks ago, funny enough. We created a collaborative environment. Firms like Shift, Advision Advisors, we had mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, we had remote photography was in there. This is a building that we started to create these office suites that were small. And I mean small, but it allowed you to get into spaces. And then we created a common conference room again that different people could use. We had some tenants, that didn't want to leave, so they stayed in there. But we even used them for further networking potentials. So really, you can imagine this floor was, you constantly see people walking across, talking to someone, asking this person. So it kind of really expanded from what, Jerel, first office was maybe 1,000 square feet.
Right.
To more like an 8,000 to 9,000 square foot office, and each of us had our own office within the office, but we still kind of had these common gathering rooms, and it acted to kind of really expand our, again, the influence, I think, of collaboration can work. And it's not that you can't grow as your own firm and continue to get big. It's that nice synergy between different firms. So
right. And here again, this was a project that we recently done. It was one of our first ground up buildings, and it was an office building down in off of 301, where the orthodontics, the doctor, she wanted something very modern. Her house is very modern. She was like one of those dream clients where she was like, hey, I want to push the limits, like do something super creative. So I was able to, have a lot more freedom in this design, especially having a blank palette, because it was just dirt there, right? So she wanted to have her practice and then have an adjacent suite that she could sublet or rent out to a medical office to support her orthodontic clinic. And then here's another picture where we had individual bays that were lined up, and it had windows, and it's all facing north. So when you're laying down, you got that nice ambient light. You feel somewhat in a close environment, because each bay, even though there's no physical walls, it creates like a separation, like the experience while you're in the chair and the technician's working with you. So it was a very nice project. I was glad that we was able to get that done.
The next project for us was American Social. Funny enough, this project started actually with David Huddlestone and Shift and ourselves coming together to go after this project. This really did start as a collaboration project, and David since has taken the job with City of St. Pete. I know he's on here, but this was another kind of the team back from the days of the collaboration where we started working on both architecture and interiors, and this became a real hallmark project for us. We'd done a lot of restaurants to date, but this was one of the ones that really broke on the scene. This one, and probably Right Square made, that set the tone that we really were given a good budget on this project. We used every bit of it. So I don't know if anyone hasn't been there. It's quite a spectacular space. And again, it allowed us to begin to work with actually the owner of the entire development, which since then, again, that's the key. You do this project, we met the developer that owns the entire portion of the Harbor Island there. And we ended up doing more work for them based on the success of this project. So they're kind of seeing how each project kind of can lead. If you do a good job, you can kind of lead to the next one getting bigger. So go ahead, Jerel.
Right. And then this is a project too that we're working with a private developer where they wanted, again, something very forward thinking, very modern. They want to do a 6-unit townhome, and I wanted to present something to them that didn't look like a traditional townhome, where you could look at the building and tell exactly where your unit is, and kind of mimic like a brownstone that you see in the New England area, or even like the bungalow refreshes that you see in South Tampa. I wanted something totally different, where you look at this building, it's like, hey, I live at that building, not this is my unit over here in the left corner. So you can't tell by the facade where a unit begins and where it ends. And there was actually penthouse units, and we had multiple levels where different people could experience different levels. And of course, the upper levels would be just private for those penthouses. So that was a nice project that was is still kind of in that development stage, and hopefully it'll be able to push through and get it built in South Tampa.
This is one of the final projects we'll show you today, for us, but this is Piney Woods office building. This is a project that we have submitted on multiple design awards. We have one design awards for this. This is kind of that hallmark project. Same thing. We interviewed with a bunch of different firms. We had more backlog, and we showed our ability to do kind of clean, modern, and we won the project. And the concept for this was it was an up and coming financial institution that wanted to show transparency in their business practices. This is Platt Avenue as it's going down, and this is a conference room you can see from that previous image, with the idea of transparency, of seeing that you could see the inner workings of this financial agency, and you'd always understand where your money was being spent. That's that conference room right up there. So again, for us, it was a nice design opportunity to show our ability to do clean, modern design.
And this was, of course, something that's not a typical architectural project, right? It was a sculpture piece that I was asked by the school board to create a monument for a cemetery that was discovered on school grounds. You might have heard about this in the news media, where there's been several graves, and mostly they're African-American graves that were during, before segregation, where development encroached on those grave sites, those burial sites, and then developments were built on top of them. So they wanted to somehow rectify the situation. So they wanted me to come in and create some type of area to give some type of respect to those buried there. And so this was the project that I created. It was like a small reflecting pool and a pedestal with kind of abstraction of a wings that's kind of lifting those souls up to the spiritual realms, kind of establishing that connection since the burial was no longer there, and there's no headstones or anything there. So I wanted to create some type of marker. And since it was on school grounds, I wanted a place where kids can go and have a personal time to meditate and experience it, and not just recreate a cemetery to be off limits, since it is on school grounds.
And the horn sounds okay. And you know,
That's it.
this is the last part. This is one that we just opened up a couple months ago, and this is definitely the biggest restaurant we've done to date. It's actually one of the biggest restaurants in Tampa Bay, and I might have to look a little bit further. This is an 18,000 square foot, 650 person restaurant that we did right off of the river. Super challenging site. FEMA regulations, wetland setbacks, natural preserve areas. And the fact that nothing could really touch the ground. Everything had to be up and above. Very challenging project, technically difficult. And oh, by the way, all four sides had to be completely visible. You couldn't have any units hanging off the side. It was a very challenging, technically challenging project. And we are going to submit it for some design awards, but obviously it's that Polynesian tiki theme. This is for the same client that we did all the Ford's garages that we've done and the Yeoman's downtown, which we like to go to before Lightning games. But we actually created the brand for them. A real spectacular space when you go inside, 32 foot ceilings, massive structure, and all that glass on the entire facade opens up. One of the interesting parts about this is we've been working with this restaurant brand with COVID on how do you open up and create more fresh air dining. 400 of these seats are outside. Some of them a lot of them are covered, and this entire inside place can have the AC turned off. We've got ventilation systems inside, and the air can move to the outside. So fun space, interesting space. And I think with that, thank you very much for your time. Well said, Jerel. And I guess we'd like to open up to any questions you may have.
Hopefully there's questions, yes, because we love to, we've been where you've been, so, we know they're out there.
That was great, guys. Perfect for anyone, but particularly for students. And I really appreciate it. If you'd like to turn your mic on and ask a question to Carlos or Jerel, please do so. Or if you want to type something in the chat box, that's open too.
I'll have to check the chat box.
I'll start with a couple of things while people are thinking about some questions. I want to ask you guys, besides your design skills, what do you think are 2 or 3 skills that are critical to succeed in practice and to think about, while you're in school and certainly after that time?
Yeah, I know you're going to go first.
I'm raising my hand for Jerel. I used to tell this to the materials and methods class all the time. 2 classes you should take in school. Please take them in school. 1, public speaking. It is so important for you to be able to tangibly talk about your project without using the word. Learning, there's definite skills that these classes will teach you on communication, whether you're presenting to a client. Again, many times these people that are selecting a firm, choosing your life, all the firms are good. I mean, really, it's your ability to communicate and to personalize with that client that many times will win you the job. And second is some kind of business class, either micro or macroeconomics, because if you start your own practice, you've got to understand money.
Right. And
Sure.
I would say, learn a little bit about the law, right? Because the law, just like, you don't have to, go to law school or anything, but you can pick up a lot of information just by understanding past situations where you know how to write an email, how to not put yourself into jeopardy, any kind of liability issues when you're consulting with clients and overpromising and all that kind of stuff. You want to be able to learn how to write legalese. Yeah, I found myself writing emails and proofreading them, and then I'm like, man, I can be almost like a law clerk the way some of these emails are written. So sometimes you might have to kind of just look into some type of books that talk about how to communicate. And I read a book a long time ago about how to negotiate, the art of negotiation. That was really cool too. I mean, it could just take like a little small self-help book where you can learn those different nuances of business, so you can understand the business side of the business. Like Carl said, even taking some business class and the financial classes, understand how to create a ledger, how to keep your cash flow going appropriately, to keep your doors open.
I think Gerald's point about emails is so critical. So much of our job is communication, and we sit with our younger people in our office and just talk to them. Don't write an email like a text. Make sure you use clients. Clients many times don't even read your whole email, so we like to try to use bullets so they read the things. But I think that's a great point, is professional emails and communication.
I think communication can't be overstated for students. And we learn some skills in school, but isn't it different communicating to people that haven't been in school?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part about the politics, I think, that Gerald brought up. Many times you want to say certain things in your emails and you can't, but you have to say it in a certain way to protect yourself, because then you save that email in your file for later. You kind of had to advise the client. You don't agree with their decision and you recommend something else, but we'll work with you to make, I think, like you said, Joe, kind of how to legalese your emails to say what you need to say, but not potentially, completely piss off your client. That's a skill. That's definitely a skill.
Yeah. No, it's a relationship that you have to nurture and maintain and sometimes dance around.
Yes.
Because you work with people, it's not like you're working with them for 3 months. You're working with them for 3 years or more to get a project built from the time they might walk in the door. Mm-hmm. You guys have been in practice now, either working with firms or on your own for 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you see the next 20 years of our discipline going? And I'm thinking of maybe Tampa Bay specifically and the architecture discipline in general.
Let me go first.
Go ahead.
Hey. Yeah, I think about this. Of course, it's something that always comes across, and even in architectural journals, you may see things about the post-COVID environment, and especially 21st century design. And I think that architecture is going to be, hopefully it will still be relevant, but it's almost as I had an old architect I worked for back in Atlanta, and he always used to say architecture is a rich man's business profession, right? So, he looked at it as being from a negative point of view, is like eventually architecture is just going to be only for rich people, right? And because the specializations out there where people want to get other degrees that aren't necessarily architecture and still do parts of architecture, like interior architecture and things like that. But I look at it from a different point of view. I think that architecture and the way that we practice is going to expand into a more of a virtual reality, right? So you're building things physically and spatially at the same time. We can translate that, we can transcribe our designs into like we already do it in 3D models, right? But I think from there, maybe it can be reverse engineered from whatever you build in that virtual reality can be back worked into plans for contractors to build from, if you see what I mean, right? So as almost looking at it from reverse, you create this perfect building, this 3D model, and then you can somehow engineer it to make it make sense with using new materials that could be out there. So I think our profession will expand.
I think it's an interesting time we're coming up on with the advent of building information systems with BIM and modeling and such. I've always been, and I'll kind of go back to Dan Powers even on this one. There's certain rigor when you draw a line. When you physically have to draw a line, you're thinking about that line because it takes time, it takes effort. You have to think of the starting point, the stopping point. And when you have to remove that line, it's a challenging thing. BIM is an amazing tool. We're using Revit in our office right now. We just made the leap, and we've been using SketchUp for a long time in AutoCAD. And the profession is getting so highly technical, kind of like what Jerel said, and the challenges to our profession. And honestly, we're being expected to take on more and more responsibilities. With COVID now, we have to handle fresh air is a big deal now. Recycles air. We're actually even looked at a unit the other day that the 100% of the air in a restaurant will be completely refreshed every 6 minutes. And that's part of their marketing campaign. So not only now having to do good design, we have to understand these highly technical systems. We have to handle the building codes. And oh, by the way, they want to do it for the lowest budget. I'm a little both positive on the new building information systems because I think it allows us to develop our designs further. But at the same time, it's very scary when you can replicate these elements so quickly in the computer without really thinking, well, should I replicate it? There's some benefits kind of the old ways as long as we still think about and use the new ways as new tools. So it's an interesting time we're entering into.
How has the emergence of these technologies that are pretty commonplace now, how do you think it's affected the kind of startup and overhead costs for firms? I mean, there was a day, right, where you could kind of rent a little space and have a couple of drafting tables and all that. And now you have to maintain an IT system 24/7. It cannot go down.
Right. Working remotely, logging in remotely, it's not all about the parallel bar and some nice soft and hard pencils, right?
It's hard.
Pinup bar. No one knows what a pinup bar is.
That's scary. Bob, that's a great question for firms like Jerel's and I. It's a huge. This is tens of thousands of dollars. A funny story. I don't know if I told you this, but we were hacked. Jerel and I think you still had some files with us. Now you still had some stuff on there. We were collaborating, but we got hacked by the Russians. Okay.
Say they were Russian.
How you buy a certain joke. Were hacked by the Russians.
So they were actually from Czechoslovakia, which we broke up to 2 countries at the time. So it wasn't really.
They encrypted every file we had. I mean, down to the pictures and the timesheets. And I get into the office. And again, Jerel wasn't affected as badly because we were still collaborating on some projects. Soul Design got pounded. And I get this email with this ticking clock, okay, that says that this ransom will double every, I think it was 12 hours. And it started, by the way, and you have to put this in context, it started at 20 Bitcoins. Now, 20 Bitcoins is a very different price now than it was back then.
Right. And we didn't know what Bitcoins was, right? That was a new thing.
Exactly. It was a new thing. And they don't pay the ransom on Bitcoins.
Right.
I talked to my IT company. They said, oh, man, that sucks. There's not much you can do about it. Ended up having to, no joke, I talked to our IT company, said, all right, so I didn't tell you this, but if I was to tell you this, I may know someone that can get a hold of Bitcoins because we couldn't legally buy Bitcoins fast enough to get them paid before it would double again. So we literally could not pay the ransom. The only way we could do it is we met a guy at a tattoo parlor and handed him cash with 2 laptops side by side and transferred the Bitcoins from one computer to the other so we could pay the Russian hackers for the decryption of our entire server. Yeah, I wish we had this guy in our corner right now because
you need that guy right there.
That is unbelievable.
We were 7 people at the time. Of course, it happens when you have major deadlines. And I'll be honest with you, we didn't have the infrastructure, the many, these bigger firms, they don't go after the bigger firms, by the way, because they've got all this incredible infrastructure and they have IT guys. IT guys, this guy right here at night, just setting up the server and, doing that kind of thing. We ended up spending tens of thousands of dollars. 1, getting all the files back we could. 2, setting up a new structure that would never allow this to happen again. Now, it was a great lesson for us that we survived, and it's funny to talk about now. It was not funny at the time. But, for these small practices, that was devastating.
Yeah.
You don't budget. You don't budget for, there's no line item in your budget that says Russian hackers, tens of thousands of dollars. But it's something that we got through, and it actually made us better. I'll be honest with you. It forced us to look at some of our internal processes, and it forced us to get better. It forced us to act like a bigger firm than we were. So now, it's funny, COVID hit. We have been 100% cloud-based since that time because we set all these processes up. So when COVID hit, we just all grabbed our laptops and started working from home. We were completely ready, 100%, only because we went through this catastrophe before. And it forced us to make certain decisions early when a lot of firms were still doing it the old way, which is buy a server, everyone connects to the server, right? And you download your files, and that was that was tough.
Well, that is an amazing story. I have truly never heard that one before, Carlos. The
I've
number
got
of
one
times
more
I've
step
talked to
for
you.
And I've got one more step for you. So we had gotten everything ready. My daughter came into the office. Gerald's already laughing at this. My daughter came to the office one day after school and downloaded pictures of kittens that she could color off of one of our computers. Lo and behold, we load the same exact virus. Now, the benefit is we were prepared this time. We got the same notice, the same ticking clock backwards. Basically, we scrubbed the whole hard drive, uploaded all of our new files, pulled everything from the cloud. We were working off the cloud instantaneously. I don't know if we're down for more than 20 minutes, just in kind of switching the servers around.
Wow.
And I didn't send a message back. I really wanted to say something nasty back, but I didn't want to get their attention again. So
No,
it's kind of let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Wow. Let me ask if there's any other questions out there from the people in the audience. Let me check the.
I don't know if I'm in the meeting chat or not.
Okay. One thing you started to talk about is kind of the post-COVID environment, and I was going to ask a little bit about that. I mean, it's interesting. The last project you guys showed, the Tiki Docs project, is already thinking about their business, because even though this might be gone, the sense is that it won't be gone for several years. It could kind of spin around the globe for a while and mutate and continue to have issues. What do you think as architects you're going to be dealing with? You both do offices. Is it going to be, are you going to rethink mechanical systems because people want to actually open windows again and let in fresh air?
Right.
Or is it going to be more complex mechanical systems that do the air changes with great frequency that you were talking about? Are you talking about UV filters in mechanical systems, or UV lights in mechanical systems and things like that? Do you have a sense on where that's going?
Well, I know that we're doing when we do religious worship facilities, and of course they haven't been meeting in person for the past year, right? And we've been asked to do COVID layouts where we are taking a regular pews inside the sanctuary, and every 6 to 8 feet we're creating areas where they would be a COVID safe seat to sit in the sanctuary, and just so they can figure out how many people they can let in at a certain time to follow that guideline. If things kind of still stay in place, and I think they will, especially since a lot of churchgoers are going to be kids up to the elderly, and they need to provide for the safety precautions. So they are going to have, like Carlos said, the air exchange rate is going to be different. The mechanical system is going to be very different. The seating layouts are going to be different. They're going to stay with a virtual / real audience. So they're going to have like dual. So of course, churches already broadcast a lot of their sermons and their speeches online, but that's probably going to remain as part of their ministry, is doing virtual and having just a small crowd there.
I think that's something that you're learning as well, Bob, is that I think certain things we've done during COVID, we found to be successes, right? And then we'll continue those practices moving forward. And some of the things we're like, we just can't get, we can't wait to do some of the things we did before again. So I think it's going to end up being a hybrid. We've taken a couple restaurant brands, and we're in a normal, and I'll just use one restaurant brand. Tiki's a good one, but like a Ford's Garage, this is a burger joint. In the past, it was 75 to 80% indoor seating with 20-25% outdoor seating, patio seating. That's completely flipped. We have redesigned their prototype to where almost 80% of the seating can be what they're calling fresh air dining. That's significant, where we either completely open the doors and turn off the AC system so you're not recirculating air, right? And you're trying to pull the inside air out. We're turning ventilation systems. I think I told you, Captive Air just came up with an idea on a hood system in a restaurant where Code says you have to provide makeup air on the inside, outside air, makeup air. And the new system is 100% outside air system for the entire building. So there is no return. There is no physical, you have a supply and a return usually on a mechanical system. There is no return. Everything technically for the whole building sucks towards the kitchen, goes out the exhaust, and fresh air is constantly made up of in the restaurant. And that's what I was telling you. They're saying they can, on an 8,000 square foot restaurant, every 6 minutes, they will have 100% outside air refreshed. So you don't even need to think about filters at that point if you think about it. Because, I mean, you need filters coming in the building, right? You have to keep the particulates from the outside, right?
Yeah.
That you still have to handle. But there's no recirculation of air. You are never breathing the same molecule. It gets dispersed into the outside.
Yeah.
So those systems are definitely coming.
But like even when we do some restaurants, we put in air curtains and then have those operable larger doors that can open up to let more fresh air in. So that ratio is offset a lot more than just doing with ducted air, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've seen that a lot with mini splits, air curtains, and then the large open up door, which you could do in the South, but up north we only have it's very seasonal.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Yeah. The thing that was really shocking in the early days of COVID was that study that came out that showed it showed a plan of a restaurant in China, mm-hmm. and how the air was being thrown, yep. and an ill person sat at this table, and there were X number of people that caught COVID that were kind of mm-hmm. downwind, mm-hmm. and it was over an hour or two, but it was really shocking, to see how real that was in just normal, relatively close quarters. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, to say we've learned a lot is an understatement. Mm-hmm. Let me ask one more time if any of you guys have any questions. You can type them in or raise your hand, and Audrey will unmute you. We've got a shy group today. This was a great conversation, guys. I could stay here a long, long time. I actually have to bounce to another meeting in 5 minutes. But I thank you for not only taking the time to do this, but constructing a lecture that was kind of your story individually and collectively, and it's kind of our big story as the School of Architecture and Community Design at USF. And I think it's, hopefully you didn't scare too many people from starting their own practice.
You can do it. You can do it. It's but very possible.
I love the fact that you guys had this collaborative piece for a while and kind of played off one another and bonded through it and were able to launch your practices through this. It's a kind of an amazing model. And we see it in other industries maybe that aren't as, I'll say aren't as kind of technically driven as ours is. But I just think it's a kind of great talk about, how do you start and how do you keep going? Mm-hmm. And we'll have you back in far less than 20 years to see how you're doing.
Great. We'll have rocking chairs at that point.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe we can do something in person.
There you go. Well, thank you for asking us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jerel.
It was fun. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, take care, be safe, right. And we'll see you guys soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, right. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone, for sitting in today. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.